and welcome to our Teaching for 21st Century webinar brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang. I'm your host, Annie Cyrus. Please use the Q&A box on your screen if you have any questions, and I promise we will get to answer them as soon as our very special guest presentation is done. With that being said, it is my privilege to introduce our guest this evening, Barry Nussbaum. He's the founder of American Truth Project, and he's also an author. His newly released book is Because You Asked, and you can find it on Amazon or go to americantruthproject.org and you can purchase it there. Hi, Barry. Welcome to the program.
Thanks to be with you. It's terrific, Annie, and so terrific to be able to share some views on a really important topic.
Agreed. And I know I am, and I'm sure all of our audience are anxious to hear all your thoughts on these very, very important topics. So, floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Everybody has gone through a really rough couple of months on the Democrat side, the Republican side, the liberal side, the conservative side, relating to the election, whether it was fair, whether it wasn't. And let's put that aside today and let's just talk about policy. A very significant change in policy is about to be enacted by the Biden administration vis-a-vis our relationship with the Islamic Republic of Iran. President Trump accomplished a great many things domestically and internationally when he was in office during his 4 years. And, you know, as you look back, sometimes the most important thing that you can do is not do anything other than disengage. And that can be a significant accomplishment in and of itself. Sometimes pulling out of a disaster is better than continuing with the disaster. And that's literally what Donald Trump did in regards to the JCPOA. Disengaging from that treaty, I'm going to use that word for a minute anyway, and we'll talk about it later, was a great event and a terrific accomplishment for his administration. So let's start with a little history if we can. In case you don't remember, because it's been out of the news, let's review what the JCPOA is and how it came to be crammed down on America, and in my opinion, is possibly the worst catastrophic blunder in American foreign policy history. I'm not kidding. It was that bad, and we may very well be going back to it. President Obama crammed it down on a very upset American Congress and an American people in a very sneaky way. Let's talk about the background. So in the beginning of the Obama administration, you might remember that our foreign policy, especially in the Middle East, was all about the Obama apology tour. And President Obama actually went to the Middle East and worked on fixing things with the countries that he perceived had been offended by previous American foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. At the time, Iran hated America, hated Israel, made no secret about it, and that they were going to destroy us both. How do I know that? Well, they announced it in Tehran in the main squares almost daily, and on social media and in press releases, and they painted it on the side of their weapons. So one of the first things that President Obama did was he promised to change that. In 2015, President Obama made a very, very famous speech in the Rose Garden. I may never forget it because of its implications that, if true, would have profoundly changed the world. As it turns out, only the part that benefited Iran was true. The part that might have benefited the United States turned out to be a pile of lies. So let's talk about that. In that Rose Garden speech, President Obama said his administration was going to put together a deal that would forever deny Iran nuclear weapons. If you remember, at the time, Iran was promoting death to America and death to Israel. The chants were nonstop. And it was quite believable that they were on their way to nuclear weapons, that if they got them, they might very well be able to create catastrophes, the like of which the world had never seen. So here's what Obama promised in that first speech, and why I said at the time, 6 years ago, that I didn't believe him. Here's number one. He said that Iran would never get nuclear weapons under his deal. That was lie number one. He said there would be anytime inspections on Iran nuclear development sites. That was lie number two. He said all sites would be open to inspectors. That was lie number three. Then he said if Iran were to breach the deal that was being negotiated, sanctions would immediately snap back into place with no delay, causing an economic catastrophe on Iran. That was a lie. So what did he do? Well, he turned loose John Kerry and Wendy Sherman to put together a deal. Now, in case you don't know who Wendy Sherman is, you should. Let me remind you, Wendy Sherman is a trained social worker. And then she went to school for some other things. But President Clinton, if you remember those days, appointed her to be the lead negotiator with North Korea. And Wendy Sherman's job was to deliver a deal that would make sure that North Korea would never get nuclear weapons. I remember Bill Clinton's speech. He was so proud of the deal she brought back from North Korea. And I got news for you. Worst deal ever, Wendy Sherman, because North Korea is sitting on a plethora of nuclear weapons. And that's after we pulled the sanctions off and we gave them tons of money and food. They breached everything. That was a Wendy Sherman deal. So instead of getting kicked out of government after her 100% failure with North Korea, she got kicked upstairs. Obama hired her to negotiate the lead seat with Iran. Okay, so Wendy goes back to work and comes home with the deal. And John Kerry was the, I would say, the high profile, and Wendy Sherman was the worker bee, and in came the JCPOA. So at its core, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, was a straightforward deal. Iran would accept strict limits on its nuclear program, meaning they would never get nuclear weapons, or so they said in the deal, in exchange for escape from the mountain of sanctions that had been around for quite some time and were destroying its economy. In addition, Iran would have to accept extensive monitoring on all of their activities and would cooperate with inquiries looking into past evidence of nuclear warhead design and development. Here are the main points that Wendy and John Kerry put together. Number one, Iran's current capacity at the time of 19,000 gas centrifuges would be reduced by 2/3, of which only 5,000 could actually enrich uranium, and they would be the old technology from the 1950s. They lied. Next, for the first 15 years of the deal, Iran would not enrich beyond the level of 3.67% purity, which means it's a low enriched uranium, the kind you use in a power station. They lied. Next, the Fordo underground enrichment plant, which is a monster cavern near the city of Qom, first came to light in 2009. It had been a secret, and under the JCPOA, it could only be used for non-military research, and 2/3 of the centrifuges there would be removed, and the remainder would not be allowed to enrich uranium, and no fissionable material would be allowed at the site. That would last 15 years. It didn't last 2. They lied. And the enrichment stockpile of uranium would be reduced from 7,500 kilograms to 3,000, a reduction of 96%, and that would be certified and monitored. They lied. And in research, development, and future enrichment capacity, R&D, they could research, but they couldn't upgrade their capacity for at least 10 years. So they wouldn't have the ability to what they call break out, which means they couldn't quickly create enough fissionable material to make a bomb. Well, not true. They breached that as well. So you come back with this agreement, and in the very beginning, people were thinking, wow, this is great. Now let's talk about Iraq, not the country, ARAK, and it's where their heavy water reactor is. That was supposed to be filled in. That wasn't supposed to be expanded, etc., etc. Here's the part where they just flipped off the world. There were supposed to be inspectors from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Commission, and they'd have full access to all of Iran's sites, all of them, anytime inspections, and they could go in everywhere all the time, and they could set up to judge whether they were getting full access and what they were finding, and would there be any problems. And finally, investigation into their past activities. Iran agreed to a roadmap with the IAEA that would provide them access to facilities and people suspected of involvement in past work leading to warheads, long-range missiles, and so on. The IAEA was supposed to certify all of that after inspections. In exchange, if Iran did all of this, the sanctions would come off, and the US and the EU would guarantee financial, economic sanctions suspended, and the oil embargo would be gone, and the banking sanctions would be gone, and they could trade in the SWIFT electronic banking system, which they needed. Barack Obama promised he would issue presidential waivers suspending all trade and financial sanctions. Now, really sounds great. They're going to do all these things, and we let them off the hook. Pretty major treaty, isn't it? Oh, wait, I said treaty. Let's explain that. A treaty under the US Constitution requires Senate debate and approval. Obama knew he would never get that. Why? The Senate was in uproar about it and said, don't you dare put this deal in front of us. It's a crackpot deal. We will never approve it. Polls in America were strongly against the deal. So what did Barack Obama do? Maybe the sneakiest thing in American foreign policy. He said, it's not a treaty. It's not even an agreement. It doesn't need governmental approval. It doesn't have to go through the Senate. It's just a working agreement. And Iran supposedly never even signed it. But the deal took effect, and almost immediately the breaches started. I'm serious. Almost immediately. Europe, the United Nations, and the United States did, get this, nothing to enforce it. So what happened? Well, almost immediately, the six major powers that came into it were starting to realize Iran had no intention of abiding by the non-treaty that they never signed. So by 2019, Iran had surpassed its limits on low-level stockpiling of uranium. And then they increased enrichment from 3.6% to 4.5%, and now it's up 10x, 10 times the limit. Then they began announcing they were putting in advanced centrifuges to greatly increase the amount of uranium that could be enhanced. And then they added hundreds more. Then Fordo was reactivated, and then they started stockpiling heavy water. And by 2020, just over a year ago, Iran said it's not going to abide by any of the restrictions. So by last year, in September, Iran's stockpile of low enriched uranium reached 2,000 kilograms, or 10 times the limit of the Iran nuclear deal. And that's according to the IAEA. This year, Iran stepped up enrichment to 20%. And now they're making natural uranium metal that's enhanced. And what that means is they're on their way to a plutonium bomb. Snapback inspections, Iran blocked them. Anytime inspections, Iran blocked them. They wanted appointments, and frequently they said no. So here's the big news. Israel, under the auspices of their secret agency, well known around the world as the Mossad, broke into the Iran nuclear evidence warehouse. And Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu went public to the world with the evidence that Iran lied. Israeli agents, it's one of the most amazing secret agent events in world history, covertly extracted documents, tons of documents, tons detailing Iran's nuclear program. In 6.5 hours, they emptied this warehouse, and they still won't say how they got the documents back to Israel. And one set was delivered to the White House, and a second set was analyzed by the Mossad, and then the prime minister went public. Senior Israeli intelligence officials proclaimed, and they showed the evidence to the world, that not only was Iran building bombs, they were building long-range missiles. They had other sites that no one knew about. They got into the building when it was unguarded, and they got away with all the proof. Now, let me ask you a question. If this was any country other than Iran, or any country, including Iran, don't you sort of feel that the documents that were authenticated should have changed world opinion? Don't you feel like the IAEA, the European Union, the United Nations General Assembly, and America ought to say, hey, the deal that's not a treaty was breached, and we are done with you? Well, based on numerous sources, including this one, that Iran was cheating like crazy and not only producing weaponized uranium, but was also producing long-range missile delivery systems that could send nuclear bombs all over the world. They were also spending the billions that Obama gave them on exporting terror. And I don't mean on a little scale. The Middle East is filled with terror proxies who work for the Islamic Republic of Iran. They're supporting guerrilla armies in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth. And the only person, and I mean this, the only world leader outside of Israel to take this seriously was Donald J. Trump. And he said, enough's enough. I'm out. Get me out of this deal. They took all of the American money. They took a relief from sanctions. They took a readmittance to the world stage on an economic basis, and then flipped off everybody and went back to spending the money on terror and nuclear weapons. So what did Trump do exactly? Well, he withdrew from the deal and put the sanctions back over the objections of the EU and the UN, and it destroyed the Iran economy. He literally said, when you play the game fairly, we'll come back, but on America's terms, not on your terms, which is what the JCPOA was. Remember, all the things that Obama promised that were going to be in the deal, that was going to limit the ability of Iran to create nuclear weapons and the delivery systems to send them around the world, were all breached by Iran. So Trump, the author of The Art of the Deal, said, basically, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not falling for that lie again. You will come back, and do the deal my way, or your economy will be in tatters, which is where it is now. So you would think that Joe Biden and his new State Department, having inherited this deal, would do the right thing. And the right thing would be, okay, Iran, we'll engage with you. No sanctions are coming off unless the inspectors go everywhere without appointments, without your permission, and can test everything that Israel found in that warehouse. We want to go to every site, not the sites that you say are okay, i.e., Iran says, well, that's an army base, you can't go there, or that's an underground base, we need a 3-week appointment, or we just don't have people to give you a tour right now, sorry, can't inspect. Literally, that's what's been happening. At this point, the IAEA doesn't get to inspect pretty much anything that Iran doesn't want them to see. It's like you're selling your house and the home inspector comes in, oh, can't look at the plumbing. Oh, don't look at the appliances. You can look at the backyard in that corner. That's not much of a home inspection report. And this is a lot more serious than a home inspection report. Biden gets elected. He says he's going back into the deal. You would think on the front end that Iran would play nice right now so as not to aggravate Joe Biden's administration, who has promised that they will re-engage. But instead of playing nice, Iran is getting more belligerent than ever. Tensions between the United States and Iran are at a boiling point. I mean, just last week, Iranian agents sent rockets into Iraq at the US air base there and blew up a bunch of stuff, which they apparently do on a weekly basis. And there were injuries among US servicemen. Obviously, an aggressive act. In response, Joe Biden said the US officials were examining the incident. Here's another one. Iran has been supplying the Houthi rebels with weapons, missiles, drones, etc., that have been attacking Saudi Arabia, inside Saudi Arabia, for a couple of years. They literally launched missiles, Iranian missiles, against the main airport in Riyadh while it was fully occupied and caused major destruction. Most recently, and by the way, there's about 24 of these incidents. Most recently, there's a massive oil spill off Israel's coast, the worst environmental disaster in Israel's history. And the beaches are a mess, the likes of which environmentally Israel has never seen before, caused by an oil spill. It's probable, if not fairly certain, according to the environmental minister in Israel, that the terrorism was caused by a Libyan ship sailing from Iran, and the oil was dumped intentionally. They know the name of the ship. It's called the Emerald. It had left Iran. Its transponder was off. It was filled with oil, and the transponder didn't get turned back on until the ship docked. She says the incident is environmental terrorism. It's an Iranian ship, and Israel will demand compensation and will sue for damages. That's not the only act taken against Israel. Last month in February, an Israeli-owned cargo ship was hit by an explosion while sailing in the Gulf of Oman. And after inspection, they believe that it was hit by at least 2 missiles. The vessel was not sunk. It survived and went to the nearest port in the UAE, where it is now being repaired. It looks like 2 holes on the port side and 2 holes on the starboard side, just above the waterline, and it's one of many attacks linked to Iran in the past several years. So you've got terror operations in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, all financed, all supplied by Iran. And now Iran is promising they have the right to enrich and will continue all their nuclear programs at their own discretion. So keep in mind They say these are all for peaceful purposes, but Iran is sitting on about a zillion years of oil that can be extracted from the ground underneath the sands in Iran for a tiny fraction of what it costs to build weapons and or nuclear power. So the idea that they need nuclear power is a cover lie that we, for some reason, seem to think is a good idea to believe. And now, for the final insult to injury, Iran is now demanding that in order to engage with the Biden administration, the United States must pay Iran what they've lost due to the sanctions, which the Grand Ayatollah estimates to be $1 trillion. Seriously, $1 trillion. We are going to engage them in a dialogue with that as the opening statement. Just a couple days ago, a group of 1,800 retired Israeli generals and officers and Mossad operatives have written a letter to US President Joe Biden, urging him, please do not return to the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. The letter, dated just a couple days ago, the group's name is Habofinistim, and they say it's with great concern that the Biden administration seeks to return to the flawed principles of the JCPOA. And from a strict security perspective, the JCPOA, creates an existential threat to the Jewish state. They're begging him not to do it. However, what's interesting is the letter was sent to the State Department and sent to the White House, no response. Iran is still bragging weekly about destroying Israel and the United States. You know, the old adage, when someone says they're coming to kill you, you should believe them. Well, Israel believes them and is acting appropriately by saying no to nuclear weapons in Iran. They believe Iran. For some reason, we don't. And here's a wild one. Saudi Arabia is now saying they are aligned with Israel. The royal family said on Israeli news a couple days ago, they are concerned about Israel's March elections because they want Prime Minister Netanyahu reelected because he gets the fact that Iran is the greatest threat to stability and peace in the Middle East, and they want him in power so they can work with Israel in a mutual defense treaty against the Shia government in Iran. They appreciate Netanyahu for his handling of the Iran and Gulf states, and they want to work together. Here's the quote. You won't believe it. We not only like Netanyahu, we love Netanyahu. He is terrific. He has the necessary charisma. He knows what he's doing, and we want him in power again. So what's the Biden administration saying now? This is where it gets really weird. A number of Biden officials have come out in the last month or so saying they are not going back into the Iran deal until Iran stops enhancing uranium. Seems like a reasonable request, don't you think? But just a couple days ago, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, this was literally a few days ago, Iran is closer to building a bomb now than ever before, and it's a first imperative to get back into the deal. So the Washington Post has called out this contradiction. Joe Biden says we're not going back until Iran starts to comply and gives us full access. And this guy says, oh, no, 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 we have to go back now. So Mr. Sullivan has contradicted his boss and others within the administration by saying, we need to do it right away. I don't know who to believe. Who do you think is running foreign policy? I'm being rhetorical. I really don't know. Normally, it's the president. When you watch him in press conferences, I'm not even sure he knows what he's saying. Meanwhile, Iran is blowing up ships, sending missiles around the Middle East, demanding ransom from America. And if I was them, I would do the exact same thing they're doing. Why? Obama gave them $150 billion with the promise that they were going to be nice. What did they do with the money? They spent it on weapons. They spent it on terror. It worked before. I think they're asking for the same thing again. And when you keep in mind the fact that Obama is surrounded by numerous pro-Iranian advisors who are the worst negotiators ever in American history, how bad will things get if they negotiate a new deal? So that's where we are today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going back into a deal. If you believe Obama and you believe his vice president, who's now president, Joe Biden, that a deal like this is better than no deal, why not just, screw it up again? It didn't work last time. And you know what Einstein said? Stupidity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Ladies and gentlemen, America could not be any dumber than they are by saying, we're going to be back in the deal with you because we know you're going to cheat on us again. And with that, I'm open to questions and discussion.
Well, let me start from the end. I was going to start from the beginning, but let me start from then. Are you sure that Biden administration is going back to the deal because they're expecting a different result? What I mean by that is, how do we know that they don't actually want to make sure that Iran has what it takes to make the nuclear weapon? Is there a reason we believe that this is for peace?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I've never thought about it, Annie. I'm not saying the question isn't astute. In fact, that may be the smartest question you can ask, because on the surface, it looks like you take the dumbest deal in history with the worst possible result, and then you say, I'm doing the same thing again. And all I'm going to ask you to do is do what you promised before, and you lied. And then we caught you, and the IAEA caught you, and the Mossad caught you. And we have tons of evidence proving you lied every week for the entire time you were in the deal. So you're right, Annie. Why would you go back and do the same thing using the same people who have proven time and time again they are completely out of their element?
I agree.
I don't know. There has to be something we don't know, because it looks so bad and so destructive, almost suicidal for the United States and Israel to participate, that it makes no sense.
Well, I will come back to the Iran deal in a minute, but isn't it the same? If you look at it, the pattern is the same with the illegals, right? Jump over the fence. We will give you time, go away, come back to your court in a couple of years, we figure something out, right? Isn't that the same pattern Democrats do anyways? Inside, outside, no matter what. It feels like the more destruction whatever deal would bring, the more interested they're in making that deal. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, I actually have an answer to that hypothetical, and that is by opening the borders and allowing everyone to come in and making everybody a citizen, and giving them voting rights. The belief among the Democrats that I talk to is they're all going to become Democrat voters. So they're sacrificing the security of the men, women, and children of the United States and the budget of the United States, because we're paying for these people, right, that jump over the fence, as you called it. We feed them, we clothe them, we house them, we give them medical care, we educate them, and we give them voting rights. And we, if we're the Democrat Party, that's a lot of voters. I can't figure out what the advantage is of letting Iran go nuclear. There's no benefit to the United States to have a rogue nation that promises the destruction of the United States, that promises the destruction of Israel, and is openly advocating for the flag of the caliphate, which is the religious government established under Sharia, to fly over the White House and the Capitol. That's political suicide. I don't understand. I can't make any sense out of it because it makes no sense to me.
Agreed. Here's a question from our audience. Question says, so can any of the evidence or deal violations by Iran even stop that nuclear train? The evidence you were talking about, released in public, put in public by Israelis Mossad.
Well, look, if this was a normal situation where there's a independent judiciary weighing the evidence, I think we could logically say, if this was a government 101 class at a community college and the professor stood up and said, hey, look, here was this agreement between the P5+1, the Europeans and the Russians and the United States and Iran. And every single thing Iran said they were going to do, they lied. Now, the Americans and the P5+1, they did everything they were supposed to do. And in exchange for all that money and all that relief and sanctions and all the new trade and the ability to export oil, blah, 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 Iran breached it 100%. And if you asked a third party to opine what's the right thing to do, well, of course they would tell you don't go back in the deal. How can you trust that same government? These are the same people that were there when Obama made the deal just a few years ago. They are rubbing their hands with glee that Barack Obama's deal is now Joe Biden's deal, and we are stupid enough to give it back to them again. So what do? They up their demands. Last time we got 150 billion. That's chump change. This time we want $1 trillion. And then we want this, and we want this, and we want this, and we want this. And don't worry, we're still going to say we're going to kill all of you, and we're going to kill all the Jews. How can you justify that? I can't.
Well, let me ask you this. Personally, here's my answer. Absolutely yes. Let me see if you would agree with absolutely yes. We go back to the deal or not, Iran is going to continue developing nuclear. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay. So no deal is better. A bad deal is better than no deal. I don't agree with that. We should not make a deal. Now, it seems as if when Obama or Biden administration makes the deal, it's not to stop Iran from making the nuclear, because they're going to make that anyways. It seems as if it's the support they want to provide Iran's regime to complete the job. Am I correct there?
Well, you're asking for data looking into the mind of people that are making no sense. It's like there's a crazy person on the street yelling at cars, and you see these people sometimes, they're mentally ill and they scream weird stuff, right? And what do they really mean? I don't know. They're seeing aliens in cars and spaceships and God knows what. In this case, there's no advantage to the United States. There's no doubt Iran's going to cheat again. They've never stopped. They never did. So you give them more money. What are they going to do with the more money? Well, spend it on terror. Keep their regime propped up. Look, I happen to talk to some very high-ranking military intelligence figures in Israel. I'm talking about at the highest level. And they are absolutely convinced, and have convinced me without a shadow of a doubt, Annie, that Iran was this close to collapsing because of what Trump had done with sanctions. You pull those sanctions off and you allow Iran to trade its oil for everything that it wants, and the mullahs will be encouraged and enabled to be there forever. They were literally so close to collapse, and they were praying. They were praying that Trump would not be president for another term, because they were scared to death over what was happening to their economy and therefore their ability to hold on to power. Why in the world would the United States enable more of that? Oh my gosh. They're not even playing nice now. They should be saying, we'll promise whatever you want. Take the sanctions off. You can inspect everything. Let us sell our oil. Let's start trading and we'll do anything. No, they're bombing ships. They're sending rebels all over the world. They're exporting missiles. Hezbollah has never been a bigger army than it is now. And Hezbollah, which is the party of God, was created, funded, trained, and equipped 100% by the IRGC, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's not a secret. They brag about it. Where do you think that money's coming from? International trade. We give them billions more. That's a lot of weapons. That's a lot of Stinger missiles. That's a lot of grenades. And that's where they're going to spend it. And that's why Israel's so concerned. And that's why the Gulf states are so concerned, because according to Shia, the Shia in Iran, the Sunnis, which is all the Gulf states, are the enemy. And they have the apostate religion that Shia Islam wants to replace.
I'm glad you brought that up, because my next question I have is, so what does this mean? I'm not going to even say if, I'm going to say when Biden administration goes back to negotiation. What does it mean for the alliance that has been created between Israel and Sunni countries thanks to Trump administration? What does it mean for that?
Well, it makes it a necessity is what it does. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that old adage has become quite true. So Saudi and UAE and the Emirates are all talking about aligning against Iran, because Iran makes no secret of the fact that they want to replace all the leaders of the Western-leaning Sunni countries, because they consider them to be enemies of true Islam. And of course, they hate the Jews, but all the Sunni states, their only way they're going to survive is aligning with Israel, especially now. Biden's administration is saying horrible things about the Sunni states. They're canceling the promises made under the Abraham Accords to do certain things for the Gulf states. I am absolutely convinced in every molecule of my being that Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, deserve the Nobel Prize. They pulled off the greatest peace deal in the last 50 years.
Yeah,
and that's gone away, or it's going away.
Yeah, we both know that's not going to happen. Meaning them winning the prize, that's not going to happen.
No, I mean, it's not like he did something great like Obama did before he became president and got a Nobel Prize, or Yasser Arafat, a terrorist murderer who got the Nobel Prize and then went back to killing Jews.
Well, yeah, right now BLM movement founders are up for that prize. They're so much better for human society, so they should.
Well, you burned down enough cities, you should get a Nobel Prize, don't you think?
Agreed, exactly. Let me ask you this, another question from our audience. Israel seems to be the only country that really wants to stop Iran from getting nukes. Do you have confidence that Israel does have enough technology and whatever else they have to be able to stop Iran from getting nukes?
I can tell you what I've been told. The answer is yes. Does Israel want to do it? Absolutely not. Bibi Netanyahu and his chief rival, Benny Gantz, who is assistant prime minister, at least for now, have both said they will never, ever allow Iran to go nuclear. And I'm told Israel has people in Iran that are very, very supportive of the position we can't let Iran go nuclear. So they'll know when Iran is getting close, which from what I'm hearing, they are. In fact, the rumor among the defense establishment in Israel was right before the Biden inauguration, they were considering a strike on Iran, thinking that Biden was going to pull the same appeasement that his predecessor in the White House, skipping a generation, obviously, which was Obama, did, and that Biden would come in and kiss Iranian tushy, just like Obama did. And there was a rumor that turned out to be untrue that Israel was ready to go. Will it happen? I honestly don't know.
Well, we have a comment from one of our audience, Ronit. She said, yes, Israel has it. And then she says, Israel has no choice. They have to. It's their survival. I'll agree. And I want to mention is not just that. Uh, for anyone who may not know, survival of Middle East depends on Israel taking the necessary steps to stop Islamic Republic of Iran's regime, because mainstream media is going to make it look like Middle East is this middle of nowhere desert that bunch of barbaric people live there and they all deserve to die. But I can guarantee you, I'm one of them. They don't. They would love to go back in time of 40 to 60 years ago when Middle East was just like any other Western country, modern, with open-minded people, educated people. So it's not just survival of Israel. Am I correct on that, Barry?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And what's really curious, Annie, is the fact that one of the logistical problems of getting long-range bomber jets from Israel to Iranian territory has been solved because Saudi Arabia is in the middle. And with all the Gulf states saying, hey, bring it on, we'll help. We have to stop Iran together. Logistically, a big problem as far as how to pull it off has been solved. The truth is, Israel cannot and will not, for its own survival, permit a nuclear Iran, for the simple reason that the big difference between Hitler's weapons at the end of World War II and Iran's weapons now, or in the very near future, can you imagine if Hitler had nuclear weapons with as crazy as he was and his idea to destroy the world? That was the only thing going for the West that he didn't get there yet, because if he did, he would have used them. And they had a very aggressive nuclear program going at the end of World War II. Iran is really close and has the long-range missiles, contrary to the United Nations General Assembly sanctions and numerous resolutions, guaranteeing they would never produce long-range missiles called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles that can deliver warheads all over the world. They violated all those ordinances, all of them. They're, by the way, carrying out missile tests on a consistent basis, constantly. Obviously, that has nothing to do with self-defense. Nobody's attacking them. Those are offensive weapons entirely. The nuclear program is offensive entirely. There are no peaceful purposes. You don't spend billions and billions and billions to create a nuclear power program when you're sitting on the world's second largest reserve of oil. They've got 1,000 years of oil under their desert. They don't need nuclear weapons. I'm sorry, nuclear power. And they're creating nuclear weapons under the guise of peaceful purposes. It reminds me of like Norway and Japan that slaughter whales for research purposes.
Yeah, and it also reminds me of the peaceful protest that was taking place last summer based on Kamala Harris' translation. I'm just saying, it's the same woman. If that was peaceful, so is Iran nuking Israel peaceful to her.
Well, yeah, you can call it whatever you want. It's still the same thing.
To be honest, it is what it is. But I guess sadly, Barry, me and you, we kind of work together daily. And we always have this thing that it doesn't matter what we label it. It doesn't matter what we call it to comfort whose feelings. Bottom line is bottom line, right? Now, with that, we have time for one question. So let me ask you the bottom line question. Anyone, anywhere watching this video live right now or later on YouTube, what can an average American do to make a difference when it comes to Biden administration making a deal with Iran?
Three things. The first thing is what I did when the the Obama administration first proposed a deal with Iran. I created an organization that morphed into American Truth Project, which is our present name of our platform and organization, of which you are the national director, and a very good one at that. And we called it then the March to Save America. And we tried to organize the Congress to protest what Obama was planning to do. As it turns out, we didn't need to do that because Obama bypassed the entire Congress with an illegal treaty that wasn't a treaty, meaning it didn't need Senate confirmation. It didn't need House confirmation. He just did it. So what I would say now are the two things that might work. Number one, contact your representative, contact your senator, and scream loudly and repeatedly that this is a rogue state that intends to kill millions. Don't give them the money to do it, and don't give them the ticket to do it by allowing those centrifuges to run 24/7, thousands of them, enriching uranium around the clock. And number two, this sounds a little bit self-indulgent, support American Truth Project, because that's what we do. We make a lot of noise in a lot of places, not just in the United States, calling attention to the fact that Iran, under the people that are running it now, is a criminal enterprise that will, given the chance, kill millions and must be stopped. You can't make a deal with the devil and expect the devil to honor it. You will be screwed by the other side. And they've done it once, and we're giving them the opportunity. And when I say we, I mean the United States, to do it again. Look, Europe is indulging them, thinking they're going to get access to oil and all that trade, and they don't care. Why? Because the Grand Ayatollah doesn't threaten to nuke Germany and France and Sweden and Norway and the UK.
Yet.
Exactly. So they're thinking, well, you know, it's not our problem. It's the United States. In the meantime, we can get rich and we can sell them farm equipment. We can sell them cars. We can sell them factories. We can build dams. We can get their oil in exchange for wheat, yada, 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 yada.
Okay, so let me ask a question regarding the answer you just gave. How do people support and get involved with American Truth Project?
It's very simple. If anyone watching has a cell phone that's handy, they can literally text the following message. In the message box where you write things, you just write the word truth, T-R-U-T-H. And at the top where you put the address of like your friend, you put just the number 88202, push send. And in about 3 or 4 seconds, those people will get an automatic subscription to our text message alert system that sends out every video and every article I do and you do, and Katie Hopkins does, and Will Johnson does, and Claire Lopez does for us. And we have people like Jamie Glazov on, and so on. And they know the truth, and we spread the truth. They can sign up there, or they can go to our website, americantruthproject.org, and sign up there. We don't charge for content. It's always free. We're trying to make a difference by spreading the word. And the best thing people can do is first get empowered by getting educated. And we are a nonprofit educational organization. We'll tell you what to do.
Perfect. So simply grab your cell phones and text the word truth, T-R-U-T-H, send it to 8820T. A small part Barry forgot to mention, you will also get the first 3 chapters of Barry's newest book because you asked for free for signing up with a link to where you can purchase the book. Are we still doing that, Barry?
I think we are, and it talks a lot about the Iran nuclear deal in there and American foreign policy, and you'll understand, at least from this author's perspective, what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And if no one has heard anything, let me make it very clear. Going back to an Iran nuclear deal will be catastrophic for the United States, will be catastrophic for Israel, and will be catastrophic for the Sunni states in the Gulf region, because Iran makes no secret of what they plan to do to all of us. And if somebody says they're coming for you and they're going to kill you, believe them.
Yes, you should. With
I
that,
do.
thank you so much, Barry, for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. And for those of you who stayed with us until now, we appreciate you. And remember, these webinars are brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang for free. So if you want to support these webinars, all you got to do is go to frontpagemag.com and consider making 100% tax deductible donation. With that being said, stay safe and goodbye.